Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up.
Hello, Ben.
Hello, Jeremy. You all right?
I am all right. New surroundings.
Yes, looks like a real office. I don't really remember what those are.
No, I don't. I just stumbled across this place and thought I'll make it my home for this week.
Yeah.
New environments. That's good. We'll see how it pans out.
Very nostalgic.
Yeah. So welcome everybody to this week's edition to Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up, where we look at everything to do with the London markets, culture, technology, and trends. This week we have a guest. We've got Jonathan Clark, who was the head of claims at Score until recently, talking about people and purpose and vision. And we had a chat with Jonathan, and we're going to play the video over the next 3 weeks because it was a long chat, but it was all really good. So we're going to get into that. But let's kick things off, as always, with the news. Ben, so I'll go first. So big news this week. Last night, the Perseverance rover lands on Mars, and this was an amazing story. I watched it live last night via the NASA website, and it was brilliant because they had commentary from inside the kind of the space control center there, and it was just amazing. The way that they did it was that they had this module that they parachuted down, and then you can see there on the photo they lowered the rover down on kind of wires, and then the module just flew off. It was absolutely incredible. And I think there's a couple of things to say about this, just in terms of the context of today's conversation about purpose and vision. Firstly, the purpose and vision around getting to the Mars is quite easy to do, and then galvanizing a vision and purpose around that is good. I think what was interesting for me was two things. So firstly, this is a clip from the video feed that I watched last night when it just landed and everyone was high-fiving and all that kind of thing. I just noticed how diverse the range of people were and how young they are in that control center, dealing with this multi-billion-pound project to land on Mars. And so I just got on the website and just had a look through who the flight directors were and the project managers and all this kind of thing. And the range of backgrounds and ages and kind of cultures that they come from is astounding, and it must add real weight to the endeavor. And I think that the second thing, which I've already touched on, is the technology. And I think some people say, why bother landing on Mars? But there's a great clip on the website, if you go there, about how they use this terrain kind of navigation technology that they've developed, where as it was floating down, they could actually look at the terrain and go, is that a risky area to land on or not? And if it was, then they'd move away. And it's quite incredible. And you can see kind of this type of technology is not just relevant in space, but it's relevant in lots of things that we do today. So yeah, absolutely fascinating story. Tons to talk about, but yeah, a couple of things there.
Yeah, it's a great story, and it's really captured the imagination. My young son was talking about it, and has been following a podcast, of one of the guys who did the last rover landing. And this, I think, is incredible. I remember the days when these always used to crash. There was all this great hype about it, and they had the confidence, and they always fell over or crashed, or then you waited and the photos didn't come through. But it does seem now that technology works in so many areas, and I expect this is an algorithm that does that, an incredible number of calculations very quickly in terms of the landing. But you're right too, is that the thing that's always been there is those kind of very young, diverse teams. And NASA does seem to be very good at that, and learned from earlier experience that you don't have to be, in your 50s to have all the experience, and this sort of kind of calm, unflappable type of confidence that allows you to do these things. It must be incredible, both in terms of the workload and then the strain and everything else, just to be able to do this, and the decision making they have to do. It's good stuff.
I think that's it, isn't it? Being able to adapt to problems as they arrive, make quick decisions, check those are right, run the numbers, and then go, yes, that's it in such a short order. It reminds me of a podcast that is absolutely amazing, which is called 13 Minutes to the Moon. And there's 2 series now. The first one is an in-depth analysis of how they got from the project launch to the moon in 10 years, just under 10 years. Quite incredible. Start from 0 to landing on the moon. And 2 episodes are featured the people involved with that. I think one of them's called How the Kids Took Us to the Moon, and just talks through how young and diverse these groups of people were and the backgrounds and how they chose them. It's just really fascinating about how teams work. And then the second series is about the Apollo 13 moon landing that didn't happen. And that's even more spectacular about how they managed to get them back. It's just amazing. Brilliant podcast. Well worth a look. So, yeah, go for it. So, next thing we've got, I think you got a bit of news, Ben, around the Aon story.
Yeah, I'm picking up on the Aon Global Trends report that was out. It's related. It came out. It was finished at the end of Q4 2020, so it hasn't taken into account what's gone on since in January and February. But it's an interesting read, and I don't pretend here to be putting anything original out, but I have picked up on something that the insurer picked up on today as well, which is their comments around claims. And I think it doesn't actually explain this table, but the table at the top, I think the red boxes are where there is going to be, they're expecting delays and issues with claims. So obviously North America is, red right across the board. But there's clearly some real concern here from Aon. And the one that has been picked up is this phrase, delay, defer, deny behavior, which is their way of saying, there's the insurers are holding up payments, and also very specifically saying that counsel should not be engaged unless it is absolutely necessary, and efforts to avoid such use have been exhausted. So we, in one small paragraph there, we've got a lot of the tension and the strains, I think, that exist at the moment in the industry. And also, I think, my take is a bit of this really important sort of almost statement about the customer and looking after the customer and put the customer first type of feeling. If you read between the lines here, so I'm sure there's cynics out there that'll just say this is always what happens, but this feels to me like new sort of language, different language, and this is not used lightly. So it is very interesting, and we're going to have to watch this throughout the year as to how this impacts, the reinsurers, as we've said before.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. Like you say, Ben, it's a new use of that language, and we'll just have to keep a watching brief and see how things pan out on that side of things. Okay, so let's move things on. So, as I said at the top of the show, we have an interview to play you. So this is the first part of a special that we've got with Jonathan Clark, whose head is the former head of claims at SCOR. We've split the interview into 3 sections. In this clip, this first interview, Jonathan is talking about some of the challenges in the London market, and then we get on to to unpick some of those challenges, especially in this episode around kind of the people and data as well. So mic's off, Ben, and here's the first clip. So welcome, Jonathan. Delighted you could join us. Until recently, you were with SCOR until the end of last year, and previously president of the CII and president of the Chartered Institute of Loss Adjusters and many, many other things, and veteran of the London market. So delighted you could join us today. Perhaps I could start off by just asking you kind of what you see as the key issues and challenges in the London market over the next sort of 3 to 5 years. How do you see it?
Okay, thank you, Jeremy, thank you, Ben. I suppose the thing that always strikes you as you look at London is it's a global marketplace, and perhaps that's a theme we'll explore as we look at one or two other areas. So I don't think there's anything new in terms of the issues and challenges, but let's just sort of pick up, throw a few out and see where they take us, and perhaps do a few more in a bit more detail. I think the first thing that I always see about London is it does need to define itself really clearly, and we see a lot of that work developing now, but there is more local placement, there's more capacity elsewhere around the world, and so it's challenged. So it's going to have a clear vision, and perhaps we'll come back to that to ride that out. I think the second issue, which again we've talked a little bit about previously, is we do need to innovate. The nature of risk is changing, and the challenge for London is developing new products that remain relevant to the market. And over the years, we know that's been a great success for London. We know when they first insured an automobile, I think they described it as a ship that ran on land. So it's a marketplace that's used to it. But I think the question mark is that still true today? Are we ready for it? COVID, I think, has thrown a lot of challenges to the market, and we're not on the streets. I think one of the great beauties of London has been that concentration, 52,000 people meeting each other on the streets, and it's those very informal meetings that have created a lot of the innovation and a lot of the thinking that we achieve. So I think my sense at the moment, and again, it's very trite perhaps to say, but the market has survived well what's happened in COVID, and now the challenge is to move forward. And I think that's the challenge that a lot of businesses are facing. We've crashed through some digital. We're all sitting here today working from home. I don't think I've been into the office for a year. But fundamentally, London is a collegiate subscription market built on relationships. And I really do see the challenge as to how we're going to take that forward as a new generation come into the market, being a real issue for us. Just another thing, I suppose, Brexit, not yet clear what the impact will be. I don't think any of us really know what the impact will be, but it's sitting in the wings. Talent, we've got an aging workforce. It's been well reported. I think it says something like 26% of the people in the marketplace are over 50. We have seen a lot of people retire in the last few years, but actually we needed new skills. And we talk about experience. Some people have one experience 1,000 times, other people have 1,000 experiences. We're going to need some new skills. And we're very fortunate there's some great new talent coming into the marketplace, but we're not an algorithm-based marketplace, pure and simple. It's about the skills and about the way that we work together. And I think, again, that's one of my concerns about how will the market bring people together in the right way. Broking mergers, big broking mergers going through now. Big question mark, who owns the client? I think, again, one of the challenges for the London market is that client intimacy. Very difficult to get in the corporate risk sector, in that big commercial sector, but very critical. And has always been an issue for the market, and I think it could become a bigger issue. And then I suppose expense, that's always there. But I think we've seen some really positive things around delegated authority that seems to have worked for us. But perhaps the last issue I'll just sort of throw out is about parametric products. An awful lot of discussion about systemic risk, an awful lot of discussion about how we could provide services for it. And if you look at some of those parametrics and you listen to some of the risk managers, particularly when you start to listen to some of the CFOs, looking for simple triggers that generate some money for them, that allows them to have a well thought through trigger that works well for them. And I'll be interested to see where we go on parametrics. And again, being close to some of the development, been very fortunate, but that seems to be another issue for us as well. So kind of quite a few things there probably on the table. I don't think anything desperately new, I'm afraid. I think COVID has changed the landscape markedly. And I don't talk about a new normal. It's about adapting. But I wonder if it's slowed down some of the pace of our innovation, because the key emphasis of the market is that ability to walk out the front door of your building, walk into a broker, meet a service provider, be with your underwriter walking across to talk to a client or whatever, and we're struggling to manage that efficiently, I think, and in a constructive way. So it's a bit of a rag bag there, but I hope nothing untoward, but certainly some issues that I see there.
So, Jonathan, I hardly know where to start. That's like the encyclopedia of issues facing the London market. But if I started with my view, which is that, right at the heart of everything is it's a market, it's competitive, and the competition is, about, for me, and certainly the data that we see is about consolidation. You've talked about the broker consolidation, and also at the other end of that's, in a sense, the very big players getting bigger, but then also a number of specialists coming in who are these supposed innovative new breed or whatever.
Yes.
So we'd love you to comment on that. And then the idea, I think, is really interesting, is just, as you raised it, is who owns the client and whether there will be a sort of competition for that, or whether there will be collaboration, because it seems to me that that debate has accelerated. And to some extent, the distribution chain might compress if technology allows that to happen. So there's a lot of things that could happen in the competitive space, isn't there, going forward? And I wonder whether we talk about acceleration, whether those things, you could see those things changing and what it would be.
Well, I think that, okay, so I think that let's just sort of pick up a few of those, Ben. I think firstly, and perhaps take us into sort of slightly different thing, I think London has to be very clear what its purpose is. And it's describing itself in its vision as the leading global specialist commercial reinsurance market. But what we're seeing from the innovators is starting to pick up elements of that value chain and starting to target more thoughtfully individuals. And I think what we're seeing from most of the innovators is they tend to be a little bit more monoline than we're used to. Very, very intimate towards where the clients are looking to be served. And perhaps we'll come back to that theme, because that seems to me ultimately one of the real sort of challenges for modern London is we have to stop selling and pushing product and start actually serving our customers. Yeah. And I think what you see from the innovators is that they all understand that is an absolutely critical dimension. And sometimes I feel, and we've talked about it at previous events with the insurance network and other places, do we occasionally lose sight of what our purpose is? And our purpose is to serve customers and to listen to where their risk issues are, and then to work collaboratively, because the whole key to London is being able to get that capacity from a subscription market. And so, again, I think you're right. We have to think about what is competition and what isn't competition, Ben. I think one of the themes that we said in one of the events that we're at is that leaders have got to lead. And that also comes of leaders have to lead by understanding what competition between leaders is. And it's a very tough gig, but leaders have to get close to their clients. And leaders then are competing for clients. We're all competing to sell our capacity at a keen price to a client who wants to buy a useful service. But I think going back to your central point around innovation, for me, all of the innovators that we can see coming in focus on a particular need of a client, understand that need, and then develop bespoke solutions for those clients. And that's where London was so strong and has been so strong throughout its history. But the innovators are starting to really push on that. And we're seeing some really interesting things going on, whether, in different areas.
Could I just ask about kind of the overall vision for the market? Because you're right, it's a straightforward sentence. We want to be the number one marketplace, but I think the problem I've got, and that touches on some of the issues that you've raised, is actually that's the ambition, but how are we going to get there? And that just seems to kind of fall over, whether it's market, central initiatives or whatever. It always seems to, the vision's there, but how do you get there? We seem to get bogged down in the mud. And then you come back to all your points about innovation and talent and having the right skills and capabilities. But if the vision is presented, but the roadmap isn't then delivered or presented alongside it, it's very difficult for those organisations involved in London market to build up a head of steam and go, right, we're on a trajectory. We know where we're going. We've got a plan. Let's go for it. I just wanted to get your thoughts really on kind of that stickiness between. We seem very good at creating the vision, but not very good at actually getting on the road and doing it.
Yeah, it's good. It's interesting, Jeremy. I mean, I tend always to come a little bit away from vision back to purpose, because although you can argue it's a bit semantic, if you get lodged in people's heads what you're really here to do, then I think you start to execute significantly better. I think people have struggled for many years with a vision because it kind of sounds a bit ethereal. It's about 30,000 feet. Whereas if you say to somebody, your job is to work for clients, make sure they can have an insurance product that's meaningful and will settle their claims when they have them, you start to take it down to a level that people understand. And I think, one of the things that I understand, say in claims that we're doing is, we're there to help people when bad things happen. The intention of an insurance product is to help people when things that they generally didn't select to happen. And we know that's a little bit trite. But I think sometimes if you give people a purpose, they're more likely to work together. Now, that's a naive thought, perhaps, but we've always struggled in London because we mistake competing with each other for the competition that's out there. And I think ultimately, at some point, what we're seeing now is a transition where people are recognizing we're in a global marketplace. If we want to compete, we have to compete collaboratively, and we have to become collegiate in the way that at various points in our history we've managed to be. But I think to your absolute point, Jeremy, I wonder why it is that we always focus on collaborating about technology and not about culture and not about attitude. Because I think if we started to tackle culture and attitude as the really big, as our big competitors are doing out there, then I think we might well start to see people recognizing purpose and the ability to change and move. But and I would say that's been what I'm noticing as I've traveled around the world, that's a real driver. And I don't think that may well be the one that you expect to be there. But I think culture and attitude are ultimately where we've got to go, because we have to get a realism about delivering and about working together. Otherwise, it gets a little bit tricky, doesn't it?
Yeah. So I completely agree with you, Jonathan, on purpose, and because I think you need a belief, and I think great organisations always have a central belief, and that permeates everybody from the top down. And I somehow think we've lost that a bit in the insurance market, because to Jeremy's point, we end up, it seems to me, always fiddling around with the technicals in the small circles, looking at the big circles. And some of the things that we've seen coming out, I think they're getting better, but Blueprint, for example, we talked about it on the show a lot. And my criticism always of it, with my critique of it, if you like, was, wow, it's just so much talking about technology, as if almost technology is an end itself, or data is an end in itself. And then somewhere on page 33, and it says, of course, this will make customer experiences better. But I was just going to talk a bit about that, because, I think you have to do a lot more work than that to make the customer experience better, and a lot more intellectual depth than just saying they want it quick or fast, and look at the great organizations. They really understand their customers. And I think that is the constant, and that's the one you have to focus on, as I guess you do too. Yeah. Do you think, though, that, and I've just gone on a bit there, but my question is basically, with the merger of Aon and WTW, you've got two massive organizations. My hypothesis is they're going to have to compete around the customer, because that's what they represent. And in the end, it seems to me that will change potentially everything, because we've all got to fall into line behind what Marsh and Aon decide. That'll be smashing each other up around the brilliant customer delivery. And then Mr. McGill as well. Yeah.
Well, and I think, Ben, you're right. If you look outside the marketplace, look at what the great leaders in personal lines have done in terms of developing intimacy to their customers. Look at, perhaps we won't name it, but look at something like LV, the way they communicate. Yeah. If it's going to be a cold freeze, you get a text telling you to turn your heating on. And although that may sound, you say, oh, actually it's nice, but actually it's a risk. They're thinking about risk. And I think that what you're seeing in the motor arena and the personal lines arena, we haven't picked up well in the commercial arena because we're an intermediated market.
Yeah.
And so we've always said we'll be intimate to the customers, but how many of our leaders meet their customers regularly? Now, I was very privileged at SCOR. I met a lot of our customers because that was the nature of our business. But when I talk to colleagues around the market, that's not what they're doing. And I think that we have to acknowledge that the brokers will not unreasonably bring the customers closer to them because they want to look at them around their risk profile, and we'll come perhaps to that in a moment. I think that London has to start to focus on risk as much as speed of service and so on. It's very easy to be obsessed by speed of service, but I've always sort of said, which would you rather have? Well-trained, good people with bad systems around them, or people who don't know what they're doing and really good systems. And if you look at the experience of somebody like a First Direct, the internet bank, but now telephone bank, etc., what they've worked out is speed isn't the key thing. It's delivering you to the right person. And I think that's one of the things I'm really pleased to start to see in the blueprint now, that from a claims perspective, we're starting to talk about triage.
Yeah.
And that's taken us a long time. ECF is fabulous if you want to, but it doesn't focus on the thing, which is to get the right kit of parts in front of the right person to make a decision. And I think one of the sort of challenges, and I'm just picking up your point, if I may, about data for a second. I don't think data skills alone are enough. What you've got to have is the ability to ask this really key question: what's really going on here? And for me, the challenge of the claims blueprint is to make sure that when that notification comes in, it's put in front of somebody who has the skill, the wit, and now the toolkit in front of them, the policy, all the stuff done to say, well, what's really happening here? What is it that's impacting this client? And what's going to impact their business? And what can we do about it? And I think that's, for me, key. And so that may not be quite where you are, Ben, but I would say that's the question to ask all the time. What's really going on here?
Yeah, and I had an interesting debate about this somewhere else, which I won't bother with boring people on here. But actually, one of the things that came out of this debate was actually there are different types of people you need to look at data. There are people who are excellent manipulators, what you might call data scientists. There are people, for me, who are then great interpreters of data, who can look at data and read between the lines and make judgments, as you say. And then I think there is a group of people, and this is something you have to do with data, where you have to say, how do we present this and how do we show it in such a way that people buy into it or engage with it? And those are sometimes the same person, but I'd say very rarely, because I think those are different skill sets and different capabilities that are naturally in people. But sometimes we talk about data scientists as if there's just this one person who can do the whole thing, and I don't believe that's the case.
No, well, I think you're spot on. I think that also comes to the question that Jeremy's raised about the vision. How do we actually really get down to it? Well, firstly, we've got to be inclusive. We've got to recognise that the new world skills we need, data people do not come in one size. They may well be very different to many of the people that we've traditionally been used to working with. They may not wish to come to work in a suit. They'd quite like to, whatever it might be, but they will be different people. And we have to learn that lots of different backgrounds, lots of different attitudes are needed in that new world, to your point, Ben, absolutely. Because data scientists come, in multiple sizes. So, the actuaries, the brilliance that they've got, towards somebody who can just look at data and say, hang on a minute, what's happening there? And I think that, that's the skill. Really quality underwriters have been able to look at a presentation and really get to the heart of, that's where the risk is. And that was a skill that they had. Now, as we enter this new world, I think we've got to build that skill. And I think it's absolutely spot on. But it means we've got to be very inclusive of the skills we're going to be drawing in. And again, I think we are behind the curve on technology. And if we're going to work on technology, we have to have people who can get the best from it. And again, that's very easy to say, but it's more than just, can I analyze data? It's about how can I really use this technology? And I think this cuts to some of the point you're raising there, Jeremy, about why don't we get things to happen? It's because perhaps we overthink it sometimes, but we need people who are really good at getting the best out of that technology, and who understand, and then have a senior enough role to be allowed to do it. And then I think the sort of, as you start to look at that, and you start to build a more compelling story for movement. But I think I agree entirely with what you're saying, Ben, but that it is about data needs to be analysed in many different ways. And we are going to have to look for people that are good at doing that.
That was good stuff. I just want to shout out to Paul in the chat for your comments as well. Getting stuff done. So yeah, enjoyed that, Ben. That was good, wasn't it? Listening back to that.
Yeah, really good. And Jonathan has a very sort of articulate and calm way of describing what needs to be focused on. And I've always liked him for his ability to focus on the human elements of the marketplace and why those are so important. And I would say the best people are doing that. I think that's the message. We do get waylaid by technology, and I think some people tend to eulogize about it, and that's people in the insurtech businesses as well. But that's partly, I think, coming from frustration that they feel nobody's listening to them, or they're not getting the funding or whatever. But fundamentally, it's about leadership, and that's really key. He said leaders have got to lead. I agree with that. But we've got to get the best out of this technology. We've had enough goes at it, but we never really got the best out of it. I think that has to start at the beginning, though, not at the end when it arrives, because that's been my experience of a lot of the so-called technology initiatives, is that there's a mandate, it's forced in, it has to happen, it's and it lands, but then people almost expect it to just work straight out of the box. But I think you have to be setting your really early on, you have to be setting out why you've got this technology, what it's going to help with, and particularly to the point about the customer, how it's going to actually deliver a better service and a better product.
Yeah, and we had a session at Tintec. Can you hear me all right? Am I a bit quiet?
A bit quiet.
There we are. I'll move that up a bit. At Tintec London Market last week, and it was Professor John Seddon, who is the expert in systems thinking, and he was basically saying that IT should always come last. You always start with the customer, and then you build your strategy around that, and then you have the IT to support it. So that's just Jonathan really supporting what he was saying as well.
Well, I think Steve Jobs said that. I often quote that, quote him on that one, which is, it's not about the technology, it's about great customer service, and then turning that into a commercial enterprise. Sometimes I think we spend too long talking about how this will help us in the business. I was working a bit with a team this week, and they're a great team, really good claims team, and we were asking about how they were developing and what was going well, and a lot of them did talk about the efficiencies that they were creating in a global service. They talked about the sharing of knowledge and data, but it was notable that very few talked about what the benefits were, the specific benefits that were accruing from that for the customer. And I think that's partly because people don't meet the customer as much, and it's not right there in the forefront all the time. And I think if it was, as if you were, working in a shop, or you were working where you saw customers the whole time, and this has been said before, you would have more of a sense of that as to why is this valuable, why is this good, and also what could I do with it, what ideas have I got now I've got it. And I think somehow we need to engineer that to happen a bit more in the marketplace. I don't know whether it's about just being more proactive and getting out and seeing people, or more collaboration, but we've basically got to meet more customers and talk to more customers and listen to more customers, and then decide and work out how we can do things better for them.
Yeah, definitely. Good. So as I said, this is the first of a 3-part interview series with John. And so, yeah, look forward to next week's building on those themes that we've laid out this morning. So yeah, thanks very much again for Jonathan. So what are you up to this weekend, Ben? Anything?
Yeah, it's going to be nice weather. Spring has sprung.
Oh,
I'm very excited. And I'm going to Kew Gardens on Sunday.
ooh,
Booked a place. Yeah, it's open. I'm going there.
wow.
And socially distanced, but I will be there.
Wow, good. That's more exciting than me. I think I'll get the bike out because it's going to be nice and see if I can still ride the thing. There's a there's a brilliant episode of The Office that I've just watched where the Steve Carell manager tries to ride a bike and he can't do it and he crashes and he just goes, "You never forget." Absolutely classic.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Great stuff. Thanks, Ben. As always, have a nice weekend, everybody.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the sun. Bye.
Burgess and Bolton's Weekly Wrap Up.